And you can look at the experiences in your life as they are, which are gifts from the universe. Everything that happens in your life happens for a reason, and that is your spiritual development. Nothing happens for another reason. So hold that thought when something is happening that you frightened parts of your personality do not like. Cancer, the death of a child, a business that's imploding, a relationship that's dissolving. Hold that thought. Nothing occurs in your life that is not for your spiritual growth.
So, Gary Zukav, this is such an honor to have you on this podcast. And the opportunity to speak with you right now is just so wonderful for me, as I've just mentioned to you before we press record. So, I just wanted to say a huge, huge welcome, first of all, and a big thank you as well for taking the time out to discuss everything that you do and to bring value to my listeners, which, you know, I couldn't be more grateful for. So thank you very much. How are you doing today, Gary?
I am well, and I'm delighted to be here and to be speaking with your family of viewers.
Fabulous. So, first of all, I just have to say, I don't think you need much of an introduction on this podcast because, you know, you're known globally by millions. And there are so many thankful people across the world whose lives you've actually changed. And I'm one of them as well. So, having read The Seat of the Soul, which is just an absolute classic, and you know, it's just one of the most important spiritual books of our time. I have to say that it absolutely changed my life, and it changed the way that I viewed my life and how I should be living it. And I just feel like so many other people feel the same.
How did
So,
you change?
how
What
did
were
I
the
change?
changes?
Intention was a big one. So, to
Yes.
always challenge my intentions and also to challenge the fearful parts of my personality. So, you know, when I'm feeling angry or if I'm feeling like resentful or jealous or something like that, then just to know how to deal with it and to grow spiritually from it. So, you know, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned from you is that we are on this earth to confront the fearful parts of our personalities and to confront the hard parts of our lives. And that's what we're here for. And that is probably the most powerful learning that I've had. I mean, there's a quote here that I actually have. I can't remember which book it's from. It could have been from The Heart of the Soul, which is one of my favorites as well. But one of the quotes was, finding and healing the cause of emotional pain is the core of spiritual growth. And that just sums it up for me. It's like, wow, that is what we're here for. We're here to challenge emotional pain. And that, Gary, that is the biggest learning that I've had from your work,
Mm.
just to put it lightly.
Oh, that's beautiful. There is a reason for challenging pain. Uh, and by the way, I want to share that um, I don't suggest that you or any of our viewers, your viewers, our viewers now,
Mm,
um, take anything that I say as so because I say it, but instead to, if you resonate with anything, to experiment with it,
mm,
take it into your life and apply it, and see what that produces. And if you like what it produces, then experiment some more, because that's what you have a life for. And everything that you've said is so accurate. Um, um, a heartfulness meditation is one that's not simply mindful, but incorporates emotions, incorporates them in a fundamental and central way. And some of those emotions feel good and some of them feel not good. The ones that don't feel good are those that originate in pain. They are pain,
mm,
originate in fear, such as just what you've mentioned, anger, jealousy, and more, resentment, competitiveness, overwhelm, superiority and entitlement, uh, inferiority and needing to please. And it's important to be able to recognize those
mm,
because Some of them come from fear, as we've been talking about. Those are the ones that hurt physically. And some come from love. The ones that come from fear and hurt physically are anger, well, the ones we just mentioned, and more. And the ones that come from love and feel good, we experience as gratitude, appreciation, caring, contentment, patience, all of the universe. And creating authentic power is developing the ability to distinguish between these in yourself and choose love no matter what's happening inside you or what's happening outside of you. So the reason for creating authentic power is to learn how to love. That's where we're going. From another perspective, that's where we already are. And it's a matter of expanding our awareness to incorporate that. You can't expand love in the universe. That's meaningless. The universe is love. But you can expand and develop and open your awareness to that love. And that's spiritual growth.
What I find really interesting when I was just rereading your books in preparation for this conversation is how us humans, we don't always know the emotions that we feel, but that's what your work is all about. It's all about emotion and studying it and recognizing it and overcoming it. And I was surprised at how little I could identify some of the emotions that I was having. So it's fascinating. And I think anybody listening would be like, do I really understand? Yeah, I understand my emotions. But when you really think about it, there's a lot of emotions that we're probably covering up or we don't understand. So, I mean, there was a particular chapter that I was reading recently in The Heart of the Soul, and it was about people pleasing. And that is me, like 100%. And I looked at it again. That chapter for me was frightening almost because you described people pleasing so accurately, more than I even recognized in myself. So I didn't even know that, people pleasing, it doesn't just evoke, feelings of wanting to please and just probably feeling a bit inferior at times. But then it also invokes feelings of terror. It invokes feelings of overwhelm and like feeling invisible. And like you were basically talking like about really diving into people pleasing in a way that I'd never felt or recognized. And that is what I find really fascinating about us. Like we just don't seem to, we can't understand our emotions, we can't label them. But then until we really focus on it, then, we don't really know they're there almost.
Yes, that's right. And by the way, it's not, when you say it's your work, the things that I share and that I and my spiritual partner, Linda Francis, share, don't belong to us. They belong to the universe. And it's our delight and our joy to share them. And as you look at emotions, it's not a matter of understanding them, but you can understand how to look at them. For example, there are only 3 tools involved in creating authentic power. One of them is emotional awareness, like you mentioned. And the book, The Heart of the Soul, is about that. And that means learning to identify your emotions and to experience them fully. To create authentic power, you can't suppress or repress or deny an emotion. It's necessary to experience them as fully as they can be experienced, and then choose to cultivate the parts of the personality those emotions come from when they come from love, and to move beyond the control or challenge those parts of the personality when they come from fear. That's creating authentic power. So how do you become emotionally aware? Well, you know this because you've read the book, The Seat of the Soul. And I feel it's an excellent book. And I want to suggest to everyone who's going to read it now that when you do more than read it, that you do the exercises in it. Linda created those exercises, and they are the strongest and best part of the book. I wrote what goes in between the exercises. If you only read the book, you'll know a lot about emotions and emotional awareness when you're done. But if you don't do the exercises, you won't be emotionally aware. And that's the purpose of the book. So it takes application. It's pretty easy to learn what to do. Whenever you're experiencing an emotion, or you think you might be, instead of looking at the world, look inside yourself. This is the first big step, because most people think that their emotions are caused by what happens in the world. What happens in the world activates internal dynamics in you, and those internal dynamics create the emotions that you experience. So if you're trying to change the world to change your experiences, you're going nowhere. You're just spinning wheels. The world does not create your emotions, but it does activate interior dynamics, which means aspects of yourself that are in motion. And those create your painful or your blissful experiences. So the first step in emotional awareness is to become aware of your emotions. And the first step in that process is to turn your attention inward and away from the world. And when you turn it inward, put your attention on your energy processing centers. These are areas in your body. For example, in your throat area, your chest area, and your solar plexus area. In the East, they're called chakras. But here in the West, we call them energy processing centers because that's what they do. You can imagine energy coming in from the top of your head and going down to the base of your torso and back up again. And as they pass through these centers, and there's 7 of them in total, the 3 that I mentioned and 4 more, they process energy and they release energy, either in fear and doubt or in love and trust. And if they release energy in fear and doubt, you hurt in the vicinity of those areas. And so look at what you're experiencing in those areas and learn how to articulate what you're experiencing in terms of physical sensations. For example, does it ache, throb, burn, sting? Does it feel like it's contracting or expanding? Does it feel like it's stabbing or churning? When you can describe what you're experiencing in your energy processing centers in those terms, you're becoming emotionally literate. Until you can, you're emotionally illiterate. For example, you were talking about people pleasing. Another way of looking at that is caretaking. If you want to caretake somebody, you're not trying to make them feel better because your heart feels that you can assist them in some way. If they're hungry, cooking some food for them, for example. But when you're trying to make someone feel better so that you'll feel better about yourself, that's caretaking. That's our people pleasing. There's an agenda. You're not doing it for the other person, you're doing it for yourself. And you can always tell if this is the case, because if you do something for someone else, say you find a gift that you think they're going to like and you give it to them, you'll find that there's agendas in that case. You'd like to be thanked, at least acknowledged. If you buy a gift for somebody and they say, oh, I've already got 5 of these, I didn't need that, and you feel disappointed or hurt, you know that you were caretaking and not caregiving. Caregiving is giving without agendas. So the reason this is important is caretaking or pleasing, people pleasing, are experiences that originate in fear. And whenever you act on an experience that originates in fear, you create consequences. And you also create consequences whenever you act from an experience that originates in love. But the consequences are different. Could be the same action, the same words. But if your intention comes from fear, you create destructive and painful consequences. for yourself. And when your intentions come from love, you create constructive and healthy and blissful consequences. So just becoming aware of your emotions is a big step in learning how to create your life consciously. It's a step toward mastery in your life. When you feel that you're feeling something or you're not sure what it is, you can practice emotional awareness. Put your attention in your energy processing centers. Look for physical sensations, and if they're painful, you know that if you act on those, you'll create pain for yourself. And while you're experiencing that, you can also use your free will to put your attention into a loving part of your personality. But before we go there, do you have any questions or thoughts that our listeners might be interested in?
Yeah. So what I was going to ask is, just say you're angry in this case. Just say that you can identify the emotion of anger, and you can feel let's say you can feel the tightness in your throat and the burning in your chest. So what do we do then? Is that all we need to do to grow spiritually, or what happens next?
Well, these steps can come in any order, but I'm presenting them in this order because it seems like a natural way to look at it for me. But your consciousness can change quickly from anger to appreciation, from jealousy to gratitude.
Mm-hmm. So we find a loving part of our
In
personality.
a moment. But you can do this consciously.
Mm.
So when you're looking at your physical sensations in your energy processing centers and you find painful physical sensations, you know that you're in a frightened part of your personality.
Mm.
While you're there, you might say, you can notice what it's thinking. If it's a frightened part, it's always going to be something judgmental or critical. Like, I'm better than this. I don't need to hear this. I already know it. Or, this is way over my head. I don't think I could ever understand this, much less do it. Or, she's so stupid. Or, I'm so stupid.
Mm.
Frightened parts of the personality think these things all the time. So when you recognize them, you can use your attention, you can use your will, your free will, to move your attention to a loving part of your personality, to a time that you felt loved or loving. Might have been with a grandparent, with a child, with a dear friend. Might have been when you were watching the sunset. Might have been when you saw dolphins. It might have been, but you know that you were loving. Then put your attention there, because where your attention goes, you go.
Mm.
And then choose to act from that loving part of your personality while you're experiencing the frightened part.
That's
The moment
tough.
of
Yeah,
that's the moment of creating authentic power.
that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what you were born to do.
Mm.
And this doesn't mean there's a should, that like you've got to do this. You don't have to do anything. You can always choose whatever you decide. And you won't be judged. Other people can judge you, but the universe won't judge you. You won't be appreciated or rewarded if you choose to be generous. You won't be punished or disdained if you choose to be stingy. But you will create different consequences. It's a matter of choice and the consequences they create. What you are choosing in each case is an intention. An intention is a quality of consciousness. It's not a goal, like to own my own 26-foot sailboat. It's not to become a carpenter. It's not to have a family. It's not to move to San Francisco. It is a quality of consciousness. All of those are intentions, you might say. They're goals. But an intention of love is a quality of consciousness. And when you act with love, that quality of consciousness infuses your words and your deeds, and you feel good.
Mm.
And people love being around you. And if they don't, That's their issue, not yours. Unless a frightened part of your personality is people-pleasing. And then it feels as though it's issue. You don't have the ability to make somebody feel good or bad. Only they can do that. So why blame yourself for how someone else is feeling?
Mm.
If they choose to experience and stay in frightened parts of their personality rather than to choose loving parts of their personality and to act and experience their lives from there, that is their choice. But how you choose is yours, and only you can choose for you. You can't choose for anyone else.
And what's really powerful is knowing that this work happens all day. So,
Yes.
you're always choosing, as you would say, you're always making choices all day, whether you know it or not consciously. And so really it's a lot of work. Like if you commit yourself to this work, if you commit yourself to develop spiritually and to grow, then it's, something that you're dealing with all the time
If you
if you
choose,
choose.
how much work does it take not to pay attention to any of this and then to continue to encounter the consequences of your unconscious intentions? If you don't know what your intention is when you speak or you act, it's coming from fear.
Mm.
And it is shaping your consequences. It is shaping your life, your experience. How much work is that to continually encounter what you have created with anger or jealousy or competitiveness or greed or insecurity or overwhelm?
Mm.
That's work.
Mm.
And it continues onward. The Buddhists have a word for that. It's creating unconscious consequences. And then when you encounter those consequences, again, creating unconscious and painful consequences. They call it the samsara, the wheel of suffering. And it can go on for months. It can go for years. It can go for an entire lifetime. Tomorrow it can go for lifetimes.
Mm.
Until you develop the ability to inject consciousness into this picture, which means to step back and realize that what you're experiencing is not coming from the ground of your being, but from a part of your personality. And you have many parts of your personality. And you can put an arm's length between you and the part of your personality that you're experiencing and see that what you're experiencing comes from that part, and you can choose to move your attention into another part. You can do that now because you have a new consciousness. Our entire species is acquiring a new consciousness.
Mm.
Within a few generations, it's happening very fast. And one of those generations, within 3 generations, one of those generations has already, 1.5 has already come. And there's a big difference between the old consciousness and the new consciousness. Now, people in your generation who have the new consciousness, let's call it multisensory perception, don't know that that's the new consciousness. For you, it's human consciousness. But it's very different from the old. And I'll explain the old so that you can understand why the world that we're living in is as it is.
Mm.
The old consciousness was limited to the 5 senses. People with the old consciousness more than believed, they knew somehow inside themselves that if something could not be tasted or touched or smelled or heard or seen, it didn't exist. And they understood power in the only way that that consciousness can. They understood it as the ability to manipulate and to control. That is our past. That consciousness is dead, and it is dying. It is still present. Our entire world, most of it, has been built by that consciousness. And that's why I love talking on your podcast and to you, Because millennials and Gen Z, right behind you, they don't have the experience of the old consciousness to compare the new consciousness with. But you can see and you can sense that there is something big in the air. Something big is happening, something epic. That's the new consciousness, the transformation of an entire species of humans, 7 billion plus individuals within 3 generations, into a new consciousness. The new consciousness is not limited to the 5 senses. In other words, you know that you're more than a mind and a body.
Mm.
You know it. You can feel it. If someone says, no, you're just neurons and hormones and endocrine systems and digestive systems, you say, yeah, that too, but I'm more. I know it. That's a multisensory perception. If you look at the world and you think to yourself, my, this world is not entirely random. It has meaning in it. And I can learn about myself from watching the world. That's a multisensory perception.
Why is this happening? Well,
It's
why is
happening.
this shift happening in the recent generations? Why not 10 generations ago, 20 generations ago? Like, what's special about now?
The old consciousness evolved over 300,000 years.
Wow.
Yes. Now you can see how unprecedented this transformation is. 3 human generations is faster than an eye blink, faster than a heartbeat.
Yeah.
In terms of the previous evolutionary time scale. It's happening now because it is time for it to happen. It's not an accident. There are no accidents in the universe. Let me put it this, I could describe it this way. There are 3 cycles that are all coming to a conclusion, which means beginning again at the same moment. That moment was the initiation of this new consciousness. One of those cycles is 12,000 years. That's an astrological cycle. Another 125,000 years. And there's another. But this doesn't explain anything. This is your intellect saying, yeah, but why?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand it, but this is something that can't be understood. It just is.
It is, and that's the same with your life. This consciousness is bringing with it not only the expansion of awareness beyond the 5 senses, it's bringing with it a new kind of power. Let me correct myself. It is bringing with it the potential of a new kind of power. Multisensory perception is happening. It's a gift. The new kind of power is the alignment of your personality with your soul. It's the ability, as I mentioned, to distinguish within yourself between love and fear, so that you choose love, you can and choose to choose love, no matter what's happening inside of you, like despair, hopelessness, rage, or what's happening outside of you, like a tsunami, like another 9/11 type event. That's authentic power. The ability to move through your life with an empowered heart without attachment to the outcome. Can you imagine that? Well, that's where we're going. And farther, farther. Another book you might be interested in is called Universal Human.
I've got it. Of course, I've got it.
I'm trying to
You can't catch me out. I've got everything.
That was written in 21. And that takes us, as we become multisensory and learn the difference between external power, manipulating and controlling, and authentic power, loving, choosing love instead of fear, and being able to distinguish between the two, we can already feel the pull of yet another stage in our evolution. That's the universal human. 5 sensory humans, like I was born. Well, I think I was. but most of my awareness for half of my life was five sensory. Although that's not so, because I had multisensory perception. It is wonderful to have multisensory perception. You can know about yourself more. You can know about people without your five senses informing you of any of the things you know. And you can look at the experiences in your life as they are, which are gifts from the universe. Everything that happens in your life happens for a reason, and that is your spiritual development. Nothing happens for another reason. So hold that thought when something is happening that you frightened parts of your personality do not like. Cancer, the death of a child, a business that's imploding, a relationship that's dissolving. Hold that thought. Nothing occurs in your life that is not for your spiritual growth. That's a part of the new consciousness. And millennials and Gen Z may not articulate this in just this way, but when they hear it articulated this way, or in other ways that it can be articulated that are meaningful to them, they resonate with it. They know there's something true in that. A five-sensory human would just dismiss it because a five-sensory human has no experiences to relate to the new consciousness. So as you hear these things and resonate with them, experiment with them. And as I said, if they create what you like in your life, experiment some more. Use your life as an experiment instead of simply being it as an experience. And you will begin to see, as you become emotionally aware and develop responsible choice, which is the ability to make a choice that creates consequences for which you are willing to assume responsibility, that everything, every frightened part of your personality hurts when you experience it fully because it creates painful physical sensations. Not the world activates one of those parts. And every time that happens, it's a reminder from the universe that you are being shown a part of yourself that you need to move beyond the control of in order to give the gifts that you were born to give. That's where meaning and purpose and joy and vitality enter your life. You are doing that. You are following your passion. This podcast is a part of that because it gives you meaning to do that. So you understand this. And all multisensory humans do. But not all of them recognize it and act on it. And that's why we're talking about these things now, so that they can recognize and contribute. Because your generation and Gen Z sense these things, but what they know is something big is happening. They know that there's something wrong with the world. They want to know, why is the world not working? Why is it crumbling? Why are our social structures disintegrating and they can't be fixed? Why can't we fix them the way we fixed things in the past? That only makes things worse. Why is that? That's what millennials want to know because they intend to contribute. They want to contribute. That's important to them. And these are the people that we're talking to. And they could be people who are in their 70s in whom the new awareness is emerging, or they could be people who came into the world, neonates, newly borns, with this new consciousness. But in either case, it's here. And the old consciousness is still here. And it's dying. You might think of an old steam engine that's rolling down the tracks. But there's no more fuel in the car behind it. So there's no engineer shoveling coal into a steam boiler. There's no fire in its belly. There's no smoke in its stack. it's decelerating. There isn't going to be any more fuel. The old fuel was external power, and that produces only violence and destruction now. And slowly, the train decelerates. People on it notice it. So what's happening? And then eventually the train stops, and they get out, and they realize they have no choice but to find another way to carry on with their journey. That steam engine is the old consciousness. It's not broken. It's obsolete and destructive now. It's not just obsolete. It's destructive. So we learn to create constructively. And when we do, when you choose love, what's that feel like? It feels good. That's joy. That's joy. Think of a time when you were loved and you knew it, or you were loving and you knew it. Tell me that wasn't joy.
Right.
Yes.
It's so wonderful to hear you speak about these things, and it just gets me excited, about what's happening. But I'm really curious about your journey from where you were when you said that, you used to struggle a lot with frightened parts of your personality, and how you got from there
I
to,
still do.
you still do,
Tamara.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
everyone does. The wonderful monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed on recently, said, or it was heard to have said, I heard that he said, when someone said, how are you always so calm? And how are you so always in equanimity? And he said, there's always a battle going on in me.
Right.
Same with me. Same with you. Same with everyone. That's why there's an old saying, be gentle with everyone you meet, because there's a great battle going on inside that person. As we become conscious and multisensory, we begin to experience it. The battle is inside, not outside. We can't change the world by conquering an enemy. That's the pursuit of external power. There's no way to change a world that's built with external power by using external power. It just adds more to the world of what it's already made of and why it's not working. It requires something new and different. That's authentic power. That's alignment of your personality with your soul. And that is our future and our evolutionary requirement. Now, there's no should. You asked me to tell you about me.
Well, to be a bit more specific with that question, I believe from looking back, when you began to write the Dancing Woolley Masters, so I looked it up online. That was 1979, and by the way, I've read that book a couple of times. I don't have a physics brain, so I've read it a couple of times.
I don't either. That's why I wrote it.
And that exactly, and I can't believe you wrote that when you don't have a physics brain, because it's so like it wraps me up in knots. But fantastic book. I believe that that's when your spiritual awareness became stronger. But then between 1979 to the Seed of the Soul in 1989, that's a 10-year gap. I'm really curious because so many people who really develop in this area, they say that, they disappeared for years and they couldn't be around people and they had to retreat and, be by themselves for years and be reclusive, and then they had to learn how to be in the world again. And, I'm just wondering what your journey was from becoming spiritually aware in such a big way and then just becoming the Seed of the Soul writer. Like, what happened in those 10 years for you? Like, what was that journey like for you?
Well, I wrote the Seed of the Soul because I was introduced to a small group of physicists. You know the story because it's at the beginning of the book. Renowned physicists, theoretical physicists. And they fascinated me with what they were talking about. I wanted to learn more, and I did.
You mean the Woolley
share it.
Masters, Dancing Woolley Masters?
That is the Woolley Masters.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Book. And that book won the American Book Award for Science. And I was just a boy from Kansas who then got a scholarship to Harvard. No one expected that. So I decided to go. And that was hard. That's different from Kansas. That's just like in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy says. This isn't, we're not in Kansas anymore. Well, that was Harvard. It was difficult for me. I learned a lot about intellectual excellence, but I didn't learn about love or about care or connection. It wasn't there. It might have been there for some people, but I didn't feel it. And I didn't experience it. And a lot of that was because of who I was. And then I went into the Army because I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to prove I was admirable. Looking back, I could say I wanted to prove that I was lovable, but I would never have used that term then because I was macho. Macho means too frightened to know you're frightened. That's what I was, macho. So I joined the Army. I became a paratrooper. I became a Green Beret officer in Vietnam. And then when I got out, I went treasure hunting in the Florida Keys. We were hunting for sunken treasure, something that's probably a lot of lore around the Cayman Islands, as it is in the Florida Keys. In those days, I was still thinking, even in thinking, just feeling, there's something I'm looking for, but I felt I could find it out there. You can't find it out there. It doesn't exist out there. It's in you. You are what you're looking for. But I kept looking and looking and looking and trying to feel better about myself, feel cool, feel admirable. And then I wound up in San Francisco. And for the first time, I stayed there for a long time, 13 years. I never did that before. I was always drifting. Not drifting, going. And that's where I wrote The Dancing Woolly Masters. And while I was writing that, I discovered non-physical reality. Sounds, it's a big irony, even for me, for anybody. But I started writing each chapter, and the people in my little group that allowed me into it, a physicist at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory above UC Berkeley, helped me. And after 6 months of writing about a chapter a month, these chapters began to fit together because I didn't know what I was writing about. I didn't know what I was hearing when I first started, but I wanted to learn. And that's when I realized I'm not writing this book alone. And this wasn't a thought, this was an experience. It's not possible to be alone. I discovered non-physical reality. Now here's the thing, Tamara. I said earlier, I've always had the new consciousness, I believe. Like when my grandmother passed on, I was at her funeral, and I used to visit her on the way home from Harvard. Several of us in a Volkswagen would drive to Kansas City, and I'd take a train down to Pittsburgh, Kansas, where I lived. But I'd spend the night with my grandmother in Kansas City, and we'd gossip about the family, and we'd stay up late at night, just enjoying each other. And she would take me in this big building she was living in to the restaurant in it. She'd introduce me to everyone in the lobby. They all had gray hair. And she'd say, "Oh, this is Mr. Bernstein. You remember him?" And I'd say, "Yes." And she'd say, "Well, here's Mr. Kornblum. You remember him?" "Yes." And if I didn't agree, she would jerk my hand down. She'd say, "Shh," even though I didn't say anything. When I was at her funeral, I was with the family in an alcove, looking at the rabbi in profile who was speaking to an audience in front of him. And there was a closed circuit TV above the archway, and I could look at it and see what the audience was seeing. They were seeing the rabbi looking at him, and I was looking at him from the side. Closed circuit TV was brand new. It was a novelty, and I started to laugh. And Grandma Libby jerked my hand down, and she said, "Shh." She didn't want me. She wanted to enjoy. She wanted to listen to her funeral.
Right.
She wanted to enjoy being at her funeral, and she didn't want me intruding and upsetting it. So that was multisensory perception, but I didn't realize it. I just knew I shouldn't tell my folks because they wouldn't understand. They were distraught. So that's multisensory perception, but awareness of non-physical reality is awareness of it. I knew that's what was happening when I realized I wasn't writing that chapter by myself or any of them, that I couldn't even be alone. It's not possible. So then I started to write another book, and I started to meet a non-physical teacher. And then I met another non-physical teacher, and I've discovered, first of all, I only know two, so I'm not an expert on this.
I love that. I only know two.
But I changed my life by listening to them. A non-physical teacher won't tell you what to do. If you ever think that you're being told what to do by a non-physical teacher, you are not in touch with a non-physical teacher. You are in touch with a frightened part of your personality. You are responsible. No teacher will tell you what to do because they cannot and will not accept responsibility for the karma that you create, your consequences. You alone are responsible for that. So this started to unfold in me. And it's a fascinating story that I love, but it's still unfolding. And so I learned more. I wound up retreating to a ranch in the middle of 75,000 acres of timber to be alone.
Right.
And then I had to move to another place. So I went to the nearest big city, which was Mount Shasta, California, where I spent 13 years also climbing that powerful mountain and being blessed by it. And then I moved to Ashland, Oregon, where Linda and I moved in 2000. And all along, and I met different people. I got invited to be on the Oprah Winfrey show. And Oprah and I created show episodes for a couple of years. And that changed my life completely. I couldn't retire. I mean, I couldn't withdraw to a quiet mountain community anymore because now I had national or global recognition. Everywhere I went, people recognized me, but it was like being in a small town where you can't go to the co-op or the grocery store without running into people you know, and that's good. It's a good thing.
How did you handle that time? Because, having celebrity status must have been very challenging for you.
It was challenging for frightened parts of my personality.
That's right. Yeah. How did you handle that?
I didn't handle them very well. I withdrew when we moved to Ashland after I finished doing shows with Oprah, and really became distant and not connected. And they weren't pleasant times for me. It's a lovely place. It's in a beautiful valley just north of California, and the people in it are lovely. Well, people everywhere are largely diverse, but it's a rich place full of communities, small ones. It's only 20,000 people, this little town I'm in. And that's where I was where Linda and I have been for 24 years. But 22 of those were not pleasant for me. And in writing the book that I'm writing now, I needed to look at that, to relive that part of my life, but with awareness and compassion, this time for me too. And all of that's going into the book, and I love writing it.
Is this a new book you've got coming out?
The new book.
Oh my gosh.
I hope it'll be finished this next year, so it would probably be published in 26.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait for that one. And just to hear your experience, right? Yeah. Just to hear your experience of that time in your life, that's absolutely fascinating, because you would think it would be the opposite, that it'd be like, yes, I find, my message is getting out there, I'm changing the world. But actually, I can understand that it was quite the opposite for frightened parts of your personality. I can see that.
There are a couple of things that helped me change my life, largely. My teacher, and then another one, and then Linda Francis, whom I met. And Linda and I have been together for about 27 years. And that's the first time I experienced love. I never loved anyone. I was addicted to sex. People meant nothing to me, and especially women. No, men didn't mean anything to. I was just playing a role, and painful, but not thinking I was painful, thinking I was pretty cool. And I've had experiences, began to have immediately experiences with Linda that I never had before. For example, not only, I guess I could say I loved her, but I'd never loved anyone before, but this was new. I loved loving her. I never knew that such an experience could be. And we began to see that what we were as we were together had a beginning. It must have been before we can remember. But we didn't focus on that. We just recognized it as so. And then for all this time, we've experimented. No, that's not the right word. Enjoyed, shared, love. Easy, complete, natural. And now I have a different look on it too, eternal. But it's really a beautiful experience. So if my experience changed as much as I changed it by creating authentic power, yours can change that much as well, and probably more.
I have to say, when I heard of Linda's passing, it was a very sad time for a lot of people. And I did pray that your teachings were getting you through your experience. And I just wanted to ask you whether, like, how that was for you, like challenging the most intense, fearful parts. Like, how was that?
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. I mean, that means a lot to me. And yes, if it hadn't been for what Linda and I were taught to teach, it would have been very difficult. It's an understatement. It was very difficult. There were times when I didn't know if I would live through it, and there were times when I didn't want to. But I kept learning. Do you remember I told you earlier? Nothing happens in your life that isn't for your spiritual development. So when this happened and the pain was so great, I knew I made a commitment not to squander this pain. It's bigger than anything I ever dreamed could even exist. And I would not squander a bit of it because I knew it was in my life for a reason. And I've been developing in new ways. I'm a different person since her soul went home. And I wouldn't trade who I am now for who I was then.
Interesting.
And Linda is not gone. Her incarnation is gone, dead, not coming back, ashes and dust. But that was an incarnation. And as we become multisensory, we begin to see, as we look at one another, we can see that what we can see is analogous to a costume that someone takes to a party. The party's your life. And they're wearing that costume. And that costume is your personality. And it's white or brown or male or female or large or tall or very good with its hands or brilliant with its mind or a painter or a parent. These are all personality aspects, and we're drawn to some of them and repulsed by others. We identify ourselves as personalities. That's the old consciousness. As we develop the new consciousness, we begin to be more interested in what's wearing the earth suit, put it that way, than in the earth suit. That's the soul. We begin to identify ourselves as souls. And then as we begin to become universal humans, we identify ourselves as life, all of life, with a capital L. So this is the process that we're now in. So Linda hasn't gone anywhere. It's been an experience for me that's been changing for 2 years. But now And it was confusing. I could talk with Linda and still miss her terribly. That didn't make any sense at all, but it didn't matter. It was happening. And I began to experience things that made no sense at all to share, but they were happening. And after a while, I realized I can't understand these. They don't make sense. The intellect isn't designed for this. It's designed to analyze data from the five senses and present to the personality those findings that are most helpful to it in pursuing external power, manipulation, and control. It's not designed for multisensory perception. It cannot comprehend it or communicate it. And I learned that the time has come for the cessation of understanding and instead to focus on the giving and sharing of joy. And I'm not special. These things that are happening to me and through me and with me and that I am now are what all of us are becoming and will become. It's just it's like the different ebb and flow in the river of evolution. Some of us are in rapids and others are in eddies, but all of us are on the same river and we're going to the same place.
Right. And that's kind of comforting in a way to know that we're all on the same path, and it helps to pull down the separation between us and to realize that we're all on the same journey.
There is no separation, Tamara. There is, in the old consciousness, an uncrossable bridge or barrier or unclimbable between the in here and the out there. That's why, from that perception, in that consciousness, it's impossible to understand how inner transformation can affect the world, can change the world. That boundary is not a part of the new consciousness. There is no in here and out there. And it's obvious that there's no way to change the world without changing yourself.
Right.
Because there's no difference between you and the world. And we begin to see other things. We've always been accustomed to seeing in terms of parts and relationships between them. There are no such things as parts, and there never have been. There is one, and all is that. This is all where we're going. This is the new consciousness beyond simply recognizing fear and moving beyond its control and cultivating love. That is the biggest step in human history that's ever been taken, and we are taking it right now. We're in the midst of it. And while this is happening, the rest is happening also. We're beginning to feel the universal human, a human that's beyond religion, beyond nation, beyond culture, beyond gender, a human who is a citizen of life first, whose allegiance is to life, capital L, first, and all else second. So I can say I'm an American first. No, it's the opposite of that. When you're a universal human, I would say I'm a universal human first and an American second. I'm a universal human first and a male second. I'm a universal human first and a grandfather second. I'm a universal human first and everything else second. Life is my focus. Life is what I am. Life is what I am committed to. Universal humans emerge from authentically powerful, multisensory humans. There are none of those yet, but they are emerging.
Exciting.
They are emerging. Isn't that exciting?
Very exciting.
Yes. And you may be one. I'm talking now to you and to everyone that's listening to us.
In this process, is meditation important?
Your life is the meditation.
Right.
It's a heartfulness meditation. You said yourself, it's moment by moment.
Yeah.
Awareness of your emotions. Your emotions are messages from your soul. They're telling you when you're in fear and when you're in love. And the pain of them is transient. You can look at experiencing a frightened part of your personality as a shortcut, not a door to misery. It's given to you, the experiences of it, to recognize and move beyond, not to immerse yourself in it, not to jump into suffering and drown in it forever.
Mm.
You can't do that forever, but you can do it for a long time, and it's so painful. But you can use these parts of your personality as they're designed to be used, to be recognized as originating in fear, and moving beyond. Nothing more than that.
Do you meditate, Gary?
Yes, my life is this meditation I'm describing to you. It's a heartfulness meditation. It's being aware. Do I sit down in lotus and position and picture or look at a candle or chant? Or I've experimented with those things, and they're all wonderful modalities. If you're called to one, experiment with it. Experiment with it. But eventually you will be drawn to more. It will be a gate to another gate to another gate. There's no end. We are not headed toward a final destination. There is no final destination. There is evolution. There is what is, and it is, and you are that. This is a part of the evolutionary process that we're in.
And how does it feel to be in authentic power? How does someone know when they're in that state?
When you're in authentic power,
Yeah.
oh, fear and love are mutually exclusive. Where there's fear, there's no love, and where there's love, there's no fear. There's no memory of fear. You do what is, it's joyful. It's joy. You are living in joy. You are more than living in joy. You are joy. And there is no way that you can relate to anyone else because there is not an else. There is no other. You are. I would say, I asked one of, not I will tell you, I asked one of my teachers, one of the two, and I love them both. But how can you love an angel? How can you love an impersonal energy dynamic that assists in the evolution of galaxies? They are love, far beyond anything I can imagine, and yet they have their own place in the universe. And all of that is happening now.
Mm.
There is no other place or time in the universe than now. That is the portal to all that is, and you are that portal. How do you know? Well, I certainly know when I'm not, because I start to hurt again. I start to have
So
anger,
it's when you feel good.
resentment, jealous. Those are painful experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm in a frightened part of my personality. My friend Ram Dass once said, or I didn't hear him say this, but I saw him write it on one of his books. He said, I intend to make my life a statement of love and compassion, and where it's not, there lies my work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same for me. It's the same for you if you have that intention to make your life a statement of love and compassion and wisdom.
You say you still feel fearful parts of your personality, obviously, because you're human, but would you say that it's a lot less than it was?
In a way, it's different than it was.
Mm.
It's different because I recognize it now for what it is. And I'm no longer thinking that the purpose is to avoid the pain and to be in the joy. The purpose is to live life in the moment. That's the Earth School. And so I can see parts of me that originate in fear without laying claim to them, without saying, that's my anger, that's my jealousy, that's my resentment. It's a part of my personality, and let it flow. But the Earth School is more than that. And you can love it all. All of it. The frightened parts, the loving parts. And again, remember what I mentioned, that we're accustomed to thinking in terms of parts, but there aren't any. And there never have been. So I asked my teacher once, one of my teachers, who said, they would say things like, you've once again reached the limit of your intellect, Gary. Rest here. One of them said, your intellect has reached a stopping point, but you have not. And so I asked one time, well, if I can't understand these things, why are you explaining them to me? And he said, because in considering or pondering these things, considering or pondering these things brings into existence the possibility, brings the possibility of its existence into being. And the possibility of its existence enables you to search for it and experience it. That's what I'm doing now.
You've been discussing your teachers, and I'm just absolutely fascinated. How do you know that it's your teacher's voice and not your own? How did you make that first distinction? Because I'm just thinking of anyone listening who's like, I want one of those. I want a teacher. How do you access
you have
it?
one. You have one. Everyone does.
How do we
Five
get there?
sensory humans don't know that because of their limitations of perception. Multisensory humans can and do, and they can interact. Intuition is the voice of the non-physical world, and your teachers are your access to compassion and wisdom beyond what we can give to one another. I know when I first met the teacher that I have been learning with for 40 years, it was channeled for me by a person that I was with. And I thought we were going to be together. But because of who I was, we didn't. We broke up. And that really disturbed me because I thought, oh, now I won't be able to be with my teacher. And one night I was driving home and I had a thought. And as soon as I had the thought, I had another thought. My teacher told me that. My teacher put that thought in me.
How did you know that? How?
I could hardly wait until I got back to our house and to ask when I talked to him again, did you give me that thought? And he said, yes, I did. And then he said, can you recognize the voice that you heard when you heard that thought? And I had to look inside. I had a lot of voices. And I realized, yes, I can. I can. And he said, well done. Communication is established. And then later he said, me, you will not lose. Her, we went different parts, different paths. We're not apart, but the paths are different. But the teacher, I did not lose. You will experience these things, and the first step is opening to them. The first step is intention, to open yourself to the meaning and purpose of your life. Follow your meaning. Your understanding can only take you so far. Let meaning be your North Star. Like a flower turns toward the sun. Let meaning be your sun and turn toward it, and then follow that. It's that simple. The rest of it is exploration. I suggest everyone who's listening come to our website. It's called theseatofthesoul.com. It's named after the book. And there's a lot of things there that can support you. Linda and I created them, and the support team, people that we've been co-creating with for up to 18 years, are creating courses, events,
yes,
books, and when you go on there, one thing you can do is go into the menu, and you'll see something that says Celebration of Linda Francis. Click that.
Yes.
And there's a video that some of us in the support team made to celebrate Linda.
Beautiful.
And then I wrote some personal messages while all of this was happening to me so that I wouldn't have to try to remember them in the future, which is another thing. There is no such thing as a future.
Mhm.
It's only now. So don't try to change something or yourself in the future. You can't. Now is the only time you can change who you are, this moment.
Yeah.
So come to the seat of the soul. I'd love to see you there.
Yeah.
And you'll see things there. We have a talk, just like what you and I are doing once a month. It's called An Evening with Gary Zukav. I love that. It's a subscription. That's how you support the Seat of the Soul Institute. But it's not much. And then we have programs and we have courses. And anything that I've said here that you've heard Tamara talk about, or any of those books, they're all available on theseatofthesoul.com.
Fabulous. And you have an event in September as well, 21st to the 22nd, Journey to the Soul, which is a live retreat.
Yes, it's online.
Fabulous.
And we're thinking of maybe having our first in-person event in 26. Oh no, in 25 next year.
Fabulous.
And I'd love to meet you. I just love everyone who's on this podcast and we to be able to meet. So let's keep in touch. You'll keep in touch with one another. Keep in touch with Tamara. You can keep in touch with me through theseatofthesoul.com.
Fabulous. Oh, I have to say this was probably one of my favorite discussions out of all of them. Obviously, because I feel like I've just gained so much from it, and it's just such a wonderful experience. I'm going to be talking about this for a while after I get off the call. So, I just wanted to say a huge, huge thank you, Gary. It's such a pleasure, and it was fabulous. Thank you so much.
You are welcome, Tamara. It's so good to meet you and to see and hear what you're doing.